Welcome to the Week 12 edition of the Sharp 600. Jason Logan is away this week. My name is Joe Osborne. I will be filling in. Thankfully, we do not need a fill-in for the co-host around these parts. We bring in our guy, Todd Furman. Todd, what's up? How did Week 11 of the NFL season treat you?
You know what, Joe? Had one of the best bets that landed relatively easily with the Seahawks winning outright. Was not happy with that Browns second half performance. But I've got a bone to pick with the anytime touchdown market. Nico Collins, first play from scrimmage on Monday Night Football. A little innocuous screen pass takes it to the house. No Laramie Tunsil dancing downfield. And just to kind of rub additional salt in the proverbial wounds, 2 weeks ago, Joe, I give out Kevontae Turpin, anytime touchdown. I'm not sure he's even on the field. And then what does he do against the Houston Texans? Breaks a slant pass for 65 yards. But I digress. It is the age-old gambler's paradox. You're either a week too early or you're a week too late, as you know all too well.
Yeah, I'm a little bitter as well. I was one of the millions on a Chiefs teaser with one of the legs paired perfectly with the Pittsburgh Steelers, by the way. But wasn't to be. Okay, so we got a couple of big topics to get into here. And, of course, we are a betting program, so we're going to put a betting spin on these stories, which will linger throughout the remainder of the regular season and into the offseason. So we got to start with the Jets first and the quarterback situation going into next season. So you're a former odds maker, so we're going to lean on your experience and your expertise here a little bit. So I'll give you the situation and the scenarios for each scenario. Give us what you think the odds will be. So the Jets quarterback situation in the offseason. Scenario number one, Aaron Rodgers remains the starter going into 2025. Scenario number two, he retires. And scenario number three, they flat out cut him or trade him.
I mean, it all depends on what kind of theoretical hold we want to build into this market. The bigger question is the over-under when Rodgers makes that decision, which we can probably set around September 1st. But, you know, having set soccer lines in the past, Joe, I'm going to make Rodgers. I'll pick him at minus $1.10 on the three-way to be back with the Jets. Rodgers to retire right around 2-1. And I think any team that sees the albatross contract attack to Rodgers, we got to make him 6-1 or greater to end up getting dealt somewhere else or the Jets to part ways.
It's messy, but it's good for those of us in the content business, isn't it? Okay, another team, another big talking point here, the Dallas Cowboys. We're playing the hits here, Todd. So the wheels have officially fallen off. The car is on fire for the Dallas Cowboys. It's getting embarrassing. We know Jerry Jones doesn't like to fire these head coaches, but Mike McCarthy, his contract will expire. Probably aren't going to bring him back, but I'll give you four scenarios, set the odds here. So the Cowboys head coach in 2025, Mike McCarthy returns. Deion Sanders is getting thrown out there all of a sudden. Bill Belichick, he wants to get back into coaching or other.
So I think if we're looking at the market here and we were setting a yes-no on Mike McCarthy, I'll make him right around a $5 favorite not to be the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. So you'd be able to take a price tag of about 4-1. And if we want to get into a three-way market in terms of who the next head coach will be, the field, of course, has to be the overwhelming favorite. If we believe what Deion has said, he is committed to the college football program at Colorado. So we will make him an 8-1 shot. Probably a bit short, but we know he's going to attract recreational bettors. And if Shedeur ends up being the pick for the Cowboys, maybe that changes the dynamic. And look, Bill Belichick has dealt with a lot of dysfunction along the way. I'm going to make him a massive long shot to avoid this situation like the plague. So I think Deion is a shorter shot to be here. We'll set Bill's odds in that 10-1 range. I know it's not what you're going to be offered at prominent sports books, but that for me feels like a true reflection of Bill's desire to join this dumpster fire.
All right, that's enough Jets and Cowboys talk for now. I'm sure you guys are sick of hearing about the Jets and Cowboys. If you like what you're hearing, though, make sure you like and subscribe. Drop a comment. Dell, start the timer. Okay, Todd, next up, a little segment that I'm going to call Fraud Check. I do think the term fraud gets overused a little bit here in the sports world and the content space these days, but still, it's kind of fun to kick this around. Last year, my Miami Dolphins and the Dallas Cowboys got identified as the biggest frauds in the league, and yeah, they showed their true colors when we got to the playoffs. So I don't necessarily think these teams are frauds. You might, though. So producer Dell has grouped together a couple teams here, so let's get your thoughts here. So Fraud Check. What team is the bigger fraud? First up, the Houston Texans may be benefiting from playing in a cupcake division, or the Minnesota Vikings. Hot start. Sam Darnold showing a little bit of regression, though. So what do you think?
So this may surprise some people, Joe, but I'm going to say that the Houston Texans are a bigger fraud. And it's not because they don't have the talent, especially at the quarterback position. And arguably, they have a much higher ceiling when they're playing their best football. But this roster, for me, looks inherently flawed. We've seen issues along the offensive line. I have concerns defensively. And while that group's going to get healthier, I just don't think Houston stacks up with the elite teams in the AFC. Minnesota, meanwhile, on the other side, yes, Sam Darnold hasn't been great, but he doesn't have to be with all the supporting cast there. If Minnesota solidifies that offensive line, Brian Flores' defense continues to stop the run and provides pressure at an absurd rate like we've seen, I think the Vikings continue to fly under the radar a bit, and we're seeing that reflected in the betting markets week in, week out for them.
Okay, next up, two of the bigger surprise teams here coming into Week 12 of the NFL season. The NFC West leading Arizona Cardinals or the Denver Broncos, who've already gone over their over-under win total for the season.
So I'll say Arizona, a little bit of a bigger fraud, and no disrespect meant for a team that is actually the favorite right now to win their division. But you look at that roster from top to bottom, and Jonathan Gannon deserves a ton of credit for what he's been able to do with this team. Drew Petzing has gotten the best out of Kyler Murray, but the one thing we've seen from Kyler, the deeper we get into the season, his play typically falls off. Maybe the late buy saves them, but the way Arizona is being priced in the big picture market, I think they're a little bit more fraudulent than the Denver Broncos, who again, getting a rookie quarterback to perform at a high level. We're seeing Bo Nix's performance reflected in the Offensive Rookie of the Year market, but I think this Broncos defense is the real deal.
Okay, next up, a couple of heavy hitters here. A couple teams out of Pennsylvania, 8-2, first place in their division. So the Philadelphia Eagles are rolling right now. The schedule has been kind of easy, though. Or the Pittsburgh Steelers, maybe some apprehension with Russell Wilson here. Do you trust him? Who's a bigger fraud between the two teams out of Pennsylvania?
You know, for this one, I have to keep my voice down, Joe. My wife, a diehard Steelers fan, isn't going to be happy with my answer. But the Pittsburgh Steelers, in my opinion, are a bigger fraud. I look at their success rate down to down, and I don't think it's sustainable for what Arthur Smith wants to do. Sure, the Steelers have answered the bell defensively, and the schedule doesn't look nearly as daunting down the stretch as we all anticipated. But this team has a clearly defined ceiling, and I think we may see the fraud start to rise up a little bit on Thursday Night Football against the Browns. Where Philadelphia, the only question I have about this team is, can Nick Sirianni step in the way of this team and keep them from achieving what that talent mix is capable of producing?
Okay, next up, let's discuss divisional futures here. I think the most intriguing division at this point of the season, the biggest surprise here, the NFC West. The Cardinals have a one-game lead. They're 6-5. Every other team 5-5, and they are the favorite here. -110 to win the division. The 49ers +300. Then we have the Seahawks and Rams +500. If you have to make a bet on one of these teams, who are you picking?
So this may sound a little counterintuitive, more on that a little bit later in the show. I think both of the long shots on the board make sense. So if you were going to play a position, maybe split that down the middle and take a little bit of 5-1 on the Rams and 5-1 on the Seahawks, because I don't think we've seen the best football from either of those teams. The injuries that continue to mount along with the travel for the 49ers, I don't like that number at all. And while Arizona may put together a complete 60 this weekend, I still have some reservations about this group. So I think both long shots extremely live in the NFC West.
Okay, so the playoff picture's starting to take place here in the NFL. Plenty of bubble teams, though, that you can probably make a decent case for. Who's your favorite plus money bet to get into the NFL playoffs?
I mean, Joe, normally when J-Lo is sitting in the hot seat there, I love nothing more than to take pot shots at his Dallas Cowboys. But with a fill-in host here, since you handling yourself like a consummate professional, I'm going to say nice things about your Miami Dolphins potentially being a dark horse with the schedule they have in front of them. I don't love what they have to do going on the road playing in cold weather, but I think the AFC, that bottom of the wild card race, a little bit more wide open than the odds suggest. So again, I would split a position, take a shot with the Dolphins north of 3-1. And I don't think the Bengals are dead yet, as that number has now drifted out just shy of 5-1. So two long shots worth a nibble.
Yeah, I kind of got my eye on the Colts here. I've seen them as high as 2-1 to get into the playoffs. Pretty easy schedule. You might be better sure to wait till after the Lions game here, but they have the Patriots, Titans, Giants, and Jaguars down the stretch of the season here. So maybe a good spot to back the Colts. Okay, so we got to talk Thursday Night Football. It's an ugly-looking one. That doesn't mean there's not some good-looking betting opportunities, though. So Pittsburgh favored by 3.5 in Cleveland total on the low end. 36.5. Todd, any thoughts on the game as a whole? Any leans betting-wise?
So the biggest storyline to follow in this game is going to be the weather. We saw this total open as high as 40 at some shops on Sunday. It was expected to be apocalyptic type weather conditions. That forecast has cleared up a little bit. So with a total now in that 36.5, 37 range, I can see making a case for the over, but I would wait closer to kickoff. And you're seeing suppressed prop numbers as well for quarterback passing yards, all the receivers. So my advice here, unfortunately, isn't actionable yet. But wait, watch that weather report. You may have an opportunity to bet a lot of these things over, given the fact that odds makers have been forced to adjust based on wind gusts that may not actually arrive in Cleveland.
Speaking of overs, I like Najee Harris to go over his rushing yard total, sitting there at 63.5. So this is a guy, he has a very high ceiling. He's hit the 100-yard mark in 3 of his last 5 games. The carries remain consistent for him, usually hovering around the 20 carry per mark game. And to bring it all together, the Browns are really bad against the run. They are 26 in yards allowed per rush attempt, especially bad over the last 3 games where they are dead last in that category in all of the NFL.
Can't argue that for a second. When you talk about weather potentially playing a role, if we do get bad weather, Najee will have a full workload on his plate, so like it quite a bit, and could see carries being a good bet as well to try and combine that with the yardage, given the high workload that I think both of us anticipate from the lead back.
All right, on to our favorite anytime touchdown scores. Todd, who is on your radar here this week?
You know, Joe, I'm going to go to the backfield for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and make a case for Bucky Irving at a price tag right around plus $1.60. Tampa fresh off the bye. They get the poorest Giants run defense, and if you haven't been paying attention, the Giants appear to be in disarray. The tankathon is officially on. Tommy DeVito named the starter. Defensive players not thrilled. And when you look at Tampa, yes, they've talked about using the hot hand and leaning into Rachaad White or Bucky, but we're seeing Bucky get more of those red zone touches. I think he gets in at plus 160.
Okay, I'm going to be a little bit more conservative. I'm going to go Travis Kelce plus 120 to get into the end zone. Something he hasn't done a lot of this season, but I do like him this week. A very good matchup for him against the Carolina Panthers, who are awful against the tight end position. They are tied for the most touchdowns allowed to tight ends here. They stink at defending in the red zone. They are 27th in opponent red zone touchdown scoring percentage, and he is still getting a lot of looks here in the red zone. He's second among all tight ends in red zone targets, coming off a lousy game where he was barely involved. I like them to get him in the mix in this one. All right, it is time for the 2-minute drill. Todd, get us started. Your 2 favorite bets of the week.
So we will kick it off, and last week we went to the Bay Area to back the Seattle Seahawks plus 6.5, Joe, but this week I'm going to fade those very same Seahawks. I thought they were extremely fortunate to get the 17-13 win against the 49ers. That game was nip and tuck all way until Nick Bosa left the game with that hip injury. Arizona fresh off the bye. There's a reason that they are the division favorites. I don't believe in them big picture-wise, but I think you're going to see some unique wrinkles. Arizona better than what the numbers suggest defensively, and offensively, they'll be able to move the football. My other best bet will take us to Sunday Night Football, and it's going to be about the Los Angeles Rams, but not the full game plus the 3. I want to back them in the first half and get in and out. We look at Philadelphia. They have been a historically slow-starting team. It's almost like Kellen Moore fights the battle, what he wants to do versus what Jalen Hurts can. I think the Rams are going to have a couple of unique ways to attack this Vic Fangio defense. We'll get in and out in the first 30 minutes. Give me the Rams plus the 1 in the first half against the slow-starting Philadelphia Eagles.
Okay, I'm going to go chalky with my first pick. I'm going to take the Kansas City Chiefs minus 11. I usually don't like them as a big favorite. I think this is a good spot, though, to back them, and a really good spot to fade the Panthers, who've lost by an average of 22 points versus teams that currently have a winning record. Kansas City, coming off their first loss of the season, they were great in this spot last season. They went 4-1-1 against the spread, and just a massive defensive gap between these teams, specifically the Chiefs' 4th in pressure percentage. Carolina, dead last. This sets up very nicely for Patrick Mahomes, very badly for Bryce Young. Then we have the Harbaugh Bowl, maybe the game of the week here. I'm going to back the Ravens to bounce back -3. So the Chargers absolutely buzzing right now. You really do have to consider the competition that they face, though. The Saints, Browns, Titans, and Bengals, losses to the Cards, Chiefs, and Steelers. The Ravens, a league best. They are great after a loss. 18-8-1 ATS after a loss since the 2020 season. 6-1 after a loss last season. Let's go Baltimore. All right, that does it for the Week 12 edition of the Sharp 600. Thank you very much to Todd Furman for joining. Thank you to producer Dell, did a fantastic job producing the show today. Thank you very much to our sponsor, FanDuel Sportsbook. Make sure you check them out for all of your sports betting needed. Thank you to all the viewers and all the listeners for checking us out. If you like the show, give us a like, drop a comment, and best of luck with your bets in Week 12.
Hey NFL fans, you can make every moment more this season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Never waste a hunch at FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Must be 21 plus and present in select states or 18 plus and present in D.C. First online real money wager, only $5 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets will expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut or visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York.